The broader U.S. hair, nail, and skincare services ecosystem generates roughly $95 billion in total annual revenue. Operating inside that massive personal care market is the modern nail salon industry, a highly specialized, incredibly labor-intensive sector requiring hundreds of thousands of individual technicians. Prior to the 1970s, manicure work was a niche luxury service performed inside broader beauty salons. The economics of the trade shifted toward a standalone, mass-market category following two specific hardware arrivals: the electric file in 1974 and the introduction of acrylic nails in 1979. The services became significantly faster, cheaper, and highly scalable. At exactly the same time, the industry received a demographic catalyst. In 1975, the actress Tippi Hedren arranged professional manicure training for 20 Vietnamese refugee women in California. That initial training seeded a business network that expanded rapidly throughout the 1980s. Today, census-based research shows that Vietnamese-Americans own over half of all U.S. nail salons and make up more than half of the total workforce in the occupation. The vast majority of these businesses operate on a very tight microscale. According to national labor studies, 68% of U.S. nail salons employ fewer than 5 people. This massive economic footprint was built on a distinct foundation: low barriers to entry, apprenticeship-style community knowledge, and family-driven microbusiness ember. The Department of Labor and state agencies have recently targeted this ecosystem, launching heavy-handed enforcement waves focused on wage theft, retaliation, and labor misclassification. The central legal conflict revolves around worker classification. The nail industry relies heavily on a 1099 independent contractor model, trading technicians as self-employed individuals. Federal agencies argue this is legally invalid for core salon workers. The IRS evaluates behavioral control, financial control, and relationships. The substance dictates classification. But under the strict economic realities test, the salon structure fails. Shared PLS systems, set schedules, and core business dependency jam the model, invalidating independent contractor status. The heavy concentration of Vietnamese ownership ensures that any sector-wide enforcement lands disproportionately on this specific community. This creates a direct collision between modern labor law and the historical micro-business model that built the trade. The widespread use of the 1099 model in these salons is not an administrative oversight or an accident. It is a mathematically predictable economic equilibrium. To understand why an employer would risk audits to maintain the 1099 model, we must evaluate the statutory math. This ledger models costs for a $50,000 technician. A W-2 triggers federal additions, $3,825 for FICA, plus unemployment taxes. The total cost jumps to $53,867, a 7.7% federal tax penalty. That calculation is highly conservative. It excludes mandatory state unemployment and workers' compensation premiums, driving true operational costs significantly higher. Compare this burden with the 1099 equivalent. Under the independent contractor model, that exact same $50,000 in pay costs the employer exactly $50,000. To absorb heavy statutory costs of W-2 compliance, owners face a strict binary choice: aggressively cut worker commissions or raise menu prices. In a hyper-competitive micro-business market operating on thin margins, sudden price hikes push clients directly to non-compliant competitors. The heavy statutory penalty attached to every single W-2 employee creates massive structural friction, actively deterring owners from formalization. The employer's incentive to avoid taxes is obvious, but the worker's perspective reveals a counterintuitive reality, challenging the assumption that the 1099 model benefits employees. This bar chart compares baseline take-home pay for both classification models at $50,000. The W-2 worker pays standard taxes and FICA, retaining $40,434. The 1099 worker must absorb the full 15.3% self-employment tax. Their take-home drops to $37,760, a net loss of over $2,600 compared to W-2. The 1099 model pushes the heaviest raw tax burden entirely onto the lowest earning participant in the transaction. If the legal risk hits the employer and the tax penalty actively hurts the employee, why do low-wage workers frequently resist W-2 integration? Basic tax math cannot explain this labor distortion. There has to be a severe external factor overriding the tax penalty and disincentivizing formal wages. That external factor is the benefits cliff, a well-documented structural flaw in statutory healthcare safety nets that aggressively distorts labor supply. In Medicaid expansion states, adults qualify for near-zero premium health coverage by keeping their income below 138% of the federal poverty level. This line graph maps gross income against disposable cash. For a single adult, that Medicaid eligibility cutoff sits at approximately $22,025. Consider a worker earning $21,500. They stay below the line, retaining full Medicaid benefits and about $18,500 in cash. Now, simulate a W-2 raise pushing gross pay to $24,000. Crossing that threshold abruptly strips the worker of Medicaid. They are immediately forced into the ACA marketplace to purchase their own coverage. Maintaining a low-deductible silver plan requires a premium equal to about 4.19% of their total income. An annual gross raise of $2,500 results in a net cash gain of only $953 after accounting for taxes and premiums. And that $900 gain does not account for sudden exposure to marketplace deductibles, currently averaging over $3,700. Earning slightly more money through formal W-2 channels literally leaves the worker financially poorer and more exposed to medical debt. This benefits cliff rationalizes worker resistance. It incentivizes shadow economy arrangements, informal contractor statuses, and off-the-books hours to manipulate eligibility. State and federal agencies are escalating audits across the nail salon industry, demanding strict W-2 compliance. But those mandates crash into two unyielding forces. On the employer side, formalization triggers severe, immediate statutory tax spikes that threaten the very solvency of thin-margin microbusinesses. On the worker side, a hostile healthcare cliff aggressively penalizes marginal income gains just above the poverty line, turning raises into financial liabilities. This dual-access model illustrates the systemic trap, locking both parties into noncompliance. The business cannot afford the compliance penalty, and the worker cannot afford the benefits cliff. Prosecuting the industry for misclassification ignores the mathematical realities of these overlapping federal systems. Aggressive Department of Labor audits alone cannot fix an issue where both labor and management have severe, rational economic incentives to avoid the legal solution. Resolving this requires structural fixes on both sides. The industry needs translated sector-specific safe harbors and clear, workable guidelines for legitimate booth rental models. The statutory safety net requires smoothing the Medicaid to marketplace transition, ensuring that small wage increases do not function as punitive taxes on low-income workers. Until the baseline economics of labor compliance actually make sense for both microbusinesses and low-wage workers, the misclassification equilibrium will remain unbroken.